Live from Tampa, Florida, with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's bid for a national championship. It's Crimson Tide Kickoff, brought to you by Alpha and Bama Stuff.
We all the hunted, man. Like, every team they play against us, we a Super Bowl. We know that, you know what I'm saying? We Alabama. Everybody wants to beat Alabama. Like, when you get in the ring with the champion, you're going to try 10 times harder, so the champion has to motivate himself to have the same motivation you have to beat him. So I have to have that same motivation to beat you and keep my title. So, you know what I'm saying? We just thinking like that, you know what I'm saying? We don't look at it as we being preyed upon. We still the predator. We still the predator.
And the Predator is on the prowl one last time this season. You're looking live inside Raymond James Stadium here in Tampa, Florida, the site of this year's college football national championship. Good evening, everybody. I'm Gary Harris, and I'll be with you for the next hour on this championship version of Crimson Tide Kickoff presented by Alpha Insurance. Alabama is going for its second consecutive national championship and an astonishing fifth in the last 8 years, and the sixth of Nick Saban's coaching career. Now, 10 years ago last week, Coach Saban was introduced by Mal Moore as the head coach of the Crimson Tide. And what a run it's been. In this decade of excellence, Saban has won 14-18 with 4 national titles. It's been arguably the most dominant run in college football history. But Coach Saban isn't focused on his legacy. He's zoned in on tonight's game against the Clemson Tigers.
I'm not really thinking about that right now. I'm really focusing on, what we have to do. I mean, look, I want to do the best job for this team and our guys. This is not the time to be falling in love with what you did, yesterday, last week, last year, 10 years ago, or anything else. I mean, I want to do the best job I can for these players, to put them in the best position that they can to have a chance to be successful against a great team. It's kind of hard to think about all that stuff when you're really trying to focus on what you'd like to do for the players that you have so much sort of gratitude for, all the hard work that they've done to put themselves in this position, and you just want to be able to help them take advantage of it every way that you can.
And we're taking advantage of the extra game and therefore an extra episode of Ctko. And as always, let's begin, as we always do, with Bama headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama headlines.
And the first headline is where? Well, Tampa, Florida. It's Alabama's third game in the city of Tampa and first since 1997, and it's Tampa's first chance to host the national championship game. It's also the Tide's first playoff game to be held outdoors. Alabama's 4 previous playoff matchups were all in domes. For the first time since there's been a championship game, going back to the BCS, which started in 1998, there's never been a rematch in the title game until now. Clemson and Alabama go head-to-head after the Tide took down the Tigers in Arizona last year. Clemson is feeling revenge, but so is Alabama. We'll explain why coming up. But perhaps the headline that dominated the week was the Crimson Tide's unexpected switch at offensive coordinator. After nearly 3 full seasons, which included back-to-back SEC championships and a national title, in fact, 3 straight SEC championships, Lane Kiffin left the program to focus fully on his new job as Florida Atlantic's head coach. His replacement is Steve Sarkisian, who will call plays for Alabama for the first time tonight. But before we delve deeper into tonight's matchup, let's take a look back to New Year's Eve, the Chick-Fil-A Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Alabama leaned on its stifling defense and a breakout performance by sophomore running back Bo Scarborough, who torched the Washington Huskies for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Washington could not find a way to tackle the Tide's big back, and it provided enough offense to go along with the defense that shut the Huskies down after an early touchdown. Bama recorded its 11th defensive touchdown of the year on a second quarter pick 6 by senior linebacker Ryan Anderson. Anderson became the 8th player to score for the Tide defense, showing just how deep the unit can be.
If you want to talk about the defense, you almost can't talk about an individual player because they all did a good job. The front guys did a really good job of allowing us to play that way, and then the back end guys did a really good job of executing what we needed to do to take those big plays out of the game. The front guys affected the quarterback, which I think was huge in the game as well.
Well, I mentioned earlier that tonight's game will be Steve Sarkisian's first as Alabama's offensive coordinator calling plays. The former Washington and USC head coach has a lot of experience calling plays, but the sudden change caught many people off guard. Zach Tigert joins us now with more on how the team is handling the transition. Zach?
That's right, Gary. Ever since last week when Alabama and Lane Kiffin mutually decided to part ways, talk has been swirling about whether or not this would be a good decision and what kind of impact would it have on the national championship game. Well, it's almost time for those questions to be answered.
We'll find out Monday night.
Last year, Nick Saban made the coaching decision of the century, executing an onside kick in the fourth quarter of the national championship game against Clemson. This year, his decision to make the switch from Lane Kiffin to Steve Sarkisian is another huge gamble, but it seems to be working thus far.
You know, we all got the same goal in mind, you know, with Coach Kiffin gone or without him, you know. But it's been going smooth. You know, I think everybody's, you know, taking it, you know, well. Transition went fast. We're moving a little faster.
Quicker, I mean, much more intense, I'd say, practices. And especially, you know, during National Championship week, everyone's trying to be really serious and go hard in practice. So it's been a tough week.
It has felt smooth. And, you know, I think a lot of that's due to the nice groundwork that Kiffin laid for us throughout the whole year. And Sark's really been able to come in and just pick up right where he left off.
So the early reviews are in, and Sarkisian has earned high marks from his players and also from his boss.
Going really well. He's done a nice job. The players have responded really well to him. He's very well organized, and it's going very well.
And for Steve Sarkisian, he says the transition has been easy, having worked as an offensive analyst all season long.
Being part of the program for the last 4 months and seeing Lane work and being around the office of game planning and working with the coaches, it's not just so foreign where I'm just coming in from the outside and trying to pick up where they left off. I've been around this thing.
But as an analyst, he hasn't been around the players. That includes true freshman quarterback Jalen Hertz. Despite this, he says that the two have a strong relationship.
I've got a really good relationship with Jalen. He's a kid who loves football. He's a gym rat. He works at the game. Those are the kind of guys I like to be around. They make my job easier. And I think it's a good one. I think we've worked well together this week, and ultimately I think we'll work well, really well Monday night.
As uncertain as the situation seems, it's all just a part of the process. Steve Sarkisian has now succeeded Lane Kiffin 3 times in their careers, but this time they might be under more pressure to perform than ever before. Gary?
Thank you, Zach. Well, Alabama is the only team to appear in all 3 college football playoffs. That's quite an accomplishment. But as I said earlier, this is the first time that the game will be played outdoors, and that means that Mother Nature has a say potentially in the outcome. And so we bring in Chief Meteorologist Richard Scott back in Tuscaloosa for today's Townsend Honda weather forecast. Richard.
Hey, Gary, things looking pretty nice back here in Tuscaloosa. I want to show you real quick because a lot of folks got plans outdoors over the next several evening hours watching the game, maybe here locally. Temperatures in Tuscaloosa, 47. It is a lot warmer compared to recent days tonight, turning a little bit cooler back around 40 at 10, 39 at 1 a.m. What about down in Tampa? Let's check it out. That forecast is going to be outdoors. Temperatures not bad at all. In fact, for Central Florida, temperatures actually kind of cool, but for our local standards, hey, that's not bad. Temperatures around halftime, 55, 7 o'clock kickoff. I think we'll be around 56, 53 wrapping up the game over in Tampa, Florida. How about that? As you travel back, if you got friends, family heading back to town, no weather issues expected. Things will be pretty quiet over the next several days. Go back live to Tampa to Gary right now.
Thank you, Richard. Coming up, we'll break down the rematch between the Tide and the Tigers, including a closer look at the player that Coach Saban calls the best in college football. Hear from Deshaun Watson about following up his spectacular performance in last year's national championship. Plus, senior safety Eddie Jackson hasn't played since the Texas A&M game, but he's still contributing to the Tide's success on the field. Find out how next on Crimson Tide Kickoff. We'll be right back live from Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. Stay with us.
I ain't over it. I'm not over it now. That's still tough for me. Knowing we had them and to come up with an L, still not over that.
I cried. It hurt pretty bad, but, that didn't stop anything at all in my mind of wanting to be back.
A tough loss for Clemson, but the Tigers are back, and so is the Crimson Tide. Only the third time that two top 5 teams will meet in the postseason in the history of college football. Now, Clemson has another shot at the championship tonight and another shot at the Crimson Tide. The Tigers say they talked about getting back to the championship in the locker room immediately following the loss to Bama last year in Arizona. And now that they're here, they're looking for a reversal of fortune.
We've been here, done that now, so it doesn't really amaze us. We're grateful for the opportunity, but we're just locked in, we're focused, and we know what we want. We've had these goals all year, so we're just locked in, and we don't want to come up short this year.
I think any competitor relishes that opportunity. You know, whether it's just like in boxing, you want to play the guy that's got the belt. That's what you want to do. I think if you look at this year, you know, the Cavs wanted to play Golden State. You know, because of what had happened the year before.
So while revenge is certainly a big factor for Clemson, it also plays a role for Alabama. Brandon Cameron joins me now with more on how the Tide is seeking its own redemption despite winning the game against the Tigers last year.
Gary, Nick Saban is a master motivator. He has a way of pushing the right buttons to motivate his players. So it might sound like coach speak when you hear his players talk about being disappointed after beating Clemson in the national championship last year. But that feeling of disappointment is why Alabama is focused on its own reversal of fortune.
After last year, to be honest with you, it didn't even feel like we won the game because of how bad we played.
A conflicted feeling after winning the biggest game of his life. But Minkah Fitzpatrick wasn't alone.
A lot of the guys were talking about how last year we didn't really play Alabama football and that we were going to try to bring that standard into this game.
Therein lies the chance for redemption.
Just being competitive, I mean, that's just something normal, yeah. It's like a little chip on our shoulder. Well, I think we gave up like, 500-some yards overall, so, I mean, it's definitely, you know, a big point.
Yeah, we licking all chops too, even though we won, you know what I'm saying? We want to come out and have a great performance and go out there and do what we need to do to gain that standard.
So you see where the defense stands heading into tonight's game. But how about the offense, also looking for a chance to show a different standard? This after disappointing in the Peach Bowl win over Washington, finishing that game with only 57 yards through the air and some underwhelming numbers from everyone not named Bo Scarborough.
It didn't sit well with the offense, me in particular, but I know the offense. It was, you know, after games like that, I just, you know, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And honestly, I almost felt like we lost. We performed so bad as an offense.
We think we got to be better. You know, we didn't execute as always as we should have. You know, we a lot of misplay opportunities. Kind of slow to get starting things up in the game, getting you know, our passing game going a little bit.
So there's two units feeling like they lost and one game to play to win.
I can remember last year, that game in Glendale, Arizona. A lot of the players were even showing frustration in the locker room. Again, this was after beating Clemson in the national championship. Some of them even turning down interviews. That's how upset they were. The disappointment was real despite winning the championship. But tonight is their chance to turn the tide. Gary, back to you.
Winning the game and still looking for payback. That's interesting. Well, tonight is the 17th matchup between Alabama and Clemson, a series that goes back to 1900. Now, Clemson had the edge in the early going, but as this series progressed, the Tide took over. 1968, a game played in Tuscaloosa. Alabama forced 5 turnovers and broke a 14-all tie in the fourth quarter to beat the Tigers 21-14. It was Alabama's 9th straight win over Clemson. Bama's 11th straight came in 1975. This one was not as close. The Tide led 35-0 at halftime en route to a dominant 56-0 rout at Bryant-Denny Stadium. The Tide had 437 rushing yards in that wishbone with 8 touchdowns on the ground in the game. The win over Clemson was one of 4 shutouts by Alabama that season. The Tide and the Tigers wouldn't meet again until 2008 for the first ever Chick-Fil-A college football kickoff game at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. Clemson was the favorite, but Alabama ran all over the Tigers. Clemson had 14 carries for a net gain of 0 yards rushing, and the Tide took down Clemson 34-10. It's a game Coach Saban often points to as a turning point for his program. Not to mention the turning point for Clemson as it led to Tommy Bowden eventually resigning and Dabo Swinney taking over as head coach. It was the first of 12 consecutive wins to open the 08 season, and although Alabama would lose its final 2, the Tide would win 3 of the next 4 national championships beginning in 2009. Flash forward 7.5 years to 2016. 364 days ago, Alabama had the Heisman winner and a breakout tight end and a well-timed onside kick. Clemson had a quarterback that challenged the Alabama defense like no other, but the Crimson Tide won its 16th national championship. Nick Saban's 6th national title, and it was Bama's 13th consecutive win over Clemson. So Clemson took the first 3 in the series, but Alabama has won every game over the Tigers since 1909. 10 of the 13 games played between the two were shutouts, 7 of those 10 won by Alabama. Coach Saban is 2-0 in his Alabama tenure over Clemson, with the only postseason win played last year between the two, last year's national championship game. Well, speaking of last year's national championship, the defensive player of the game was safety Eddie Jackson. Jackson suffered a season-ending leg injury in October, but has still been an essential part of this Alabama team. In fact, just before the Chick-Fil-A Peach Bowl, Jackson published a letter to his teammates in the Players Tribune. It was a letter of inspiration and appreciation, reflection on the years that Jackson says changed his life. Jackson expressed frustration with having his season end and not being able to complete the season and compete with his brothers. But his off-the-field presence has helped this team stay unbeaten.
One thing that I took from that article that some people don't realize, especially if you haven't played on a team, especially a football team, which is probably the greatest team game there is because there's more participants, that no matter what you search for in your life, no matter where you go or what you do, all right, when you're in that huddle, there ain't nobody special. Everybody's together. Everybody has respect for each other, and everybody appreciates the job that everybody else does. And you can go a long way in doing a lot of things, and you may never find that.
Don't go anywhere. Crimson Tide Kickoff is just getting going good. Coming up later, Dabo Swinney reflects on his Alabama career and how it shaped the man that he is today. Stay tuned. Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance, returns right after this short timeout.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
With only one game left to play in the season, here's a look at the bowl records by conference. The Atlantic Coast Conference leads the way with an 8-3 mark, while the Big 12 is 4-2. The SEC and Pac-12 are both 500. SEC 6-6. The Pac-12 3-3. A rough go for the Big 10 so far. 3-7 overall during the bowl season. Welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff, presented by Alpha Insurance, and it's my pleasure to welcome in the commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey. Commissioner Sankey, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for the invitation.
All right, we know how much bowl pride means to the different conferences, and the SEC throughout the years has been dominant. 7 straight national championships were snapped by Florida State from the ACC. And now this year, there's been a lot of talk that the ACC is the best conference. We'll settle who the best team is tonight. How important is it for these conferences to have good bowl showings and of course, obviously, to have the national champion?
It's important, but you also have to keep in mind the time of year and maybe the nature of the games. Right. You also have to keep in mind that we're the conference that's the only conference to ever have 12 teams playing bowl games, right, which means from top to bottom, the quality is outstanding. Last year we had 10. We won 9 games, lost 2. No conference has ever won 9 games. The ACC has a chance tonight, which we certainly don't want to see that. We also had more top 25 wins as a league across the season, played more top 25 teams. So our teams challenge themselves, and sometimes you win those games. We're used to that a lot, and sometimes you come up on the short end.
Obviously, you're concerned with the welfare of the entire conference, but Alabama has a chance to make some history tonight, too, and that's 5 national titles in the last 8 years, which would be a remarkable feat. It's already remarkable what they've done, but this could really be a cherry on the top for the SEC if the Tide can finish it off tonight.
Having the national championship is important, I think, to our conference for the right reasons, because it represents the accomplishments of young men on a team, from our coaches, for the tradition, our fans, the participation that occurs all around our football programs, and it certainly would be, and it's a remarkable run, and you have to credit the amount of effort, the focus day to day, week to week, year to year. because they don't just give championships away. Those are earned and earned through hard work and a lot of effort.
I want to ask you about having the marquee coach in the country, too, in your league. Coach Bryant for many years, Coach Spurrier, and now Nick Saban. That's a point of pride for the SEC, too, to have the guy that's recognized not only maybe as the best coach of his generation, but of all time.
We have great coaches throughout history, and obviously Nick's achievements over the last 10 years are unmatched. We've had 3 other programs, though, win national championships, and I think that speaks to the depth of coaches across the conference. And I know right now we have 13 coaching staffs thinking about how they'll be in this game next year, how they'll win a conference championship next season. But for now, it is Alabama's evening, and it's a tribute to what both Nick and that team have accomplished.
While I've got you, I know football kind of is the marquee sport in most conferences, including the SEC, but you've worked hard with men's basketball to get it back to where it was in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. Obviously, Kentucky is a premier program. Where do you think the SEC is at overall? Do you see improvement coming, and do you see a time when, more than 3 or 4 teams are going to be getting in the NCAA tournament?
I think we've seen improvement this year. We're not at the destination yet. My responsibility is to lay a foundation, make sure we're talking about the right issues. I looked at the RPI that everybody talks about, and Florida, I think, is 3 in the country. Kentucky's not far behind at 5 or 6. So those are 2 programs at the very top of the heap nationally, and we're accustomed to that. Where we are maybe a little bit further behind is we've got some teams in the 20s and 30s, and then we go to the 50s in the rankings. We need those 50s to move forward. So, that's 1 or 2 wins during the non-conference season. We had just a bevy of close losses in non-conference games, and those are the ones that are hard, but they set you up for success eventually. And we want to see the progress that I think we've experienced this year continue and actually increase.
Your tenure so far, you having fun, you enjoy it, things going well. You had so much time there with Commissioner Slive, so I know you were ready for it, but how's it gone so far?
I think it's gone well. We've got 1 of 1 national championships, and it'd be nice to have 2 of 2. The graduate patches that are on the uniforms of SEC graduated student athletes is a special piece. Some of the building we've done with student athletes. Collaborative replay was an important step.
Absolutely.
You noted the changes in men's basketball. We've got staff working on enhancing the experience around all of our conference championships. The relationship with our athletics directors as they continue to change. We have new presidents will remain strong, and we have a bright future ahead as a conference.
Final thing with you, Hurricane Matthew, obviously the postponement of LSU in Florida, and you caught a little flack in the media.
A little bit.
Yeah. But I know you didn't have complete autonomy there. I know the SEC presidents are wanting to vote and have voted the first step to give you more control that when an issue like this occurs, you can step right in and do something.
Yeah, and this isn't great TV, and I thought about mentioning it because we've had so much success that the one drag was that couple of weeks as we worked through a hard issue. We had a great game eventually played, but it was difficult. Our bylaws didn't grant me the authority just to say, well, we're going to play this game. The responsibility was to work together, which we eventually did, but the athletics directors have recently come up with a solution, and then we'll review that with our presidents in March and look for perfect weather all next football season. How about that solution?
Absolutely. One last thing for tonight, Roll Tide. I think it's appropriate for the whole conference tonight, don't you?
Yeah, tonight it is Roll Tide. I get to wear a little bit of crimson in my tie. Usually it's a lot of green and brown, but it would be great to see an SEC team, in this case Alabama, win a national championship.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it. Coming up next, the man that gave the Crimson Tide defense fits last year. Hear what Deshaun Watson makes himself think of to get ready to go in these big games. That's coming up next on Crimson Tide Kickoff, live from Raymond James Stadium right here in Tampa.
Obviously, Deshaun Watson is a fantastic player. Probably had as big an impact on the game as any single player in the game. Deshaun Watson is, I think, maybe arguably the best college football player in the country. I think he's a fantastic competitor and a great player and played a fantastic game against us. Probably the most significant player in impacting the game that we played since Cam Newton.
Welcome back to Ctko live at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida, site of tonight's national championship game. Well, Deshaun Watson gets another crack at the Crimson Tide, and the Alabama defense gets another chance to try to slow him down. The talented Tigers quarterback lit the Tide up last year for nearly 500 yards of total offense and 4 touchdowns. He's coming off a big all-around game against Ohio State in last week's Fiesta Bowl. Deshaun Watson has all the physical gifts a top-rated quarterback needs, but it's his mental makeup that seems to set him apart.
He's a competitor. He's a believer. He believes in himself. You know what I'm saying? He know who he is. That's the first start. So when a guy back there just believe in himself like that and confident in himself and his team, you know what I'm saying? It always makes it hard to beat because he's the leader.
You know, if you give that man more than 2.5 seconds, he's going to make a play downfield. So you take pride in giving him as much time as he needs and wants. He's got the it factor. Not many people have it.
He's just so steadfast, and he's just so even keel all the time. And so no matter if we get up big or we go down big, he's going to be the same guy, and that's what we love about him.
I don't worry about all the stats and things like that. You know, I just try to focus on, you know, getting the final outcome and, you know, focus on winning. Because, you know, all that stuff last year I did, you know, it's good, but at the end of the day, you know, you want the W and be a national champion.
Watson and the Clemson offense had a huge game last year, but the Tigers defense, not so much. Clemson's hoping for more out of its defensive unit this time around. They're led by Broyles Award winner, defensive coordinator Brent Venables, and the Alabama offense is anticipating one of its biggest challenges this season.
Big, fast, physical. I mean, you know, we struggled with them last year. You know, they were a very good defense last year, and same thing this year. You know, we're going to have to clean up everything that we, you know, messed up in the game and come in and, you know, play a great game against them.
Incredible. They are very, very, very good. You know, just as good as they were last year, if not better. Really athletic, strong up front, really good linebackers, good D-line. It's going to be a really tough challenge because they're playing really well now, too.
Well, Clemson certainly has one of the top defensive units in college football, but the Tigers' defense, not Alabama. The Crimson Tide still the kings of D right now. And Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers are trying to establish the same sort of consistent success that Coach Saban has been able to establish in Tuscaloosa over the past decade. Right now, Saban and the Tide, of course, is Clemson's biggest obstacle.
If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best, and that's Alabama right now. So we're definitely nipping at their heels, but they're the standard, and they've been the best for a while. But we want to get there too. So I think if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best.
They're always striving to get better. I don't think you ever arrive. I think when you arrive, you get passed up. Complacency, and that's what I have such great respect for Alabama. I mean, they're never satisfied. They just keep chasing greatness, and that's a great quality to have.
And it's so easy to compare last year's game to this year's. We've done it. Everybody has to kind of talk about how the teams match up. But players on both squads are quick to point out that there are differences from 2015 season to the 2016 season.
Well, I wouldn't compare this team to last year's team. Last year's team was a national championship team who was the best team in the country last year. So this team is a whole different team in itself.
And certainly a big moment in last year's championship game was Kenyon Drake's 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown that put the Tide up by 11 in the fourth quarter. It was part of a streak of 10 consecutive games that the Tide scored a non-offensive touchdown last year. Now this year alone, Alabama has 15 non-offensive TDs. 11 of them have been scored by the defense. And number 11 came last week against Washington when Ryan Anderson picked off Jake Browning and returned it 26 yards for a touchdown right before halftime. It was Anderson's first score of the season, and it caught the attention of all his teammates, and not for all the right reasons either.
Ryan was talking about me being slow, but when I was watching Ryan run, I was running laps around him. I was trying to wait for him. I was finding someone to block, and Ryan was running so slow, but he lumbered into the end zone, and I was happy for him.
Oh, I jogged. That was like 40%. You know, I looked to see if anybody was coming, and you know, I had to turn the jets on. It was like, y'all all see him open up, man, against Ole Miss.
And Anderson may have had the last laugh, but Jonathan Allen still has the edge in total touchdowns this year. 15 non-offensive touchdowns is incredible for the team. Eddie Jackson, despite missing the last 5 games, has more non-offensive TDs than anybody else. Of course, that's because he returned 2 punts for touchdowns and also had a pick 6. Mika Fitzpatrick, Ronnie Harrison, and Jonathan Allen are all tied with 2 TDs. Allen and Anderson have that little rivalry. And then there are 6 players that have 1 non-offensive score. Stay with us here on Crimson Tide Kickoff. Alabama is loaded with NFL talent. We'll talk with Chase Goodbread coming up. You know him from Crimson Cover TV, and he also covers college football for NFL.com. He'll join me next here on Ctko, live from Tampa. Stay with us.
High snap, handoff, Scarborough breaks tackles. He's loose. He's to the 40. He's to the 45-50. He's down the left sideline. He won't go all the way, but he may. He cuts back to his right. He's got blocking help. Scarborough in. Touchdown. 68 yards. No flags on the play.
It was the Bo Scarborough show at the Georgia Dome last week. 180 yards on 19 carries, helping the Tide to a 24-7 win over the Washington Huskies. And Bo Scarborough certainly has NFL skills, and he'll be a future pro one day, but he's just one of a number of Alabama players that will wind up playing in the NFL. Chase Goodbread from Crimson Cover TV and NFL.com with us now to talk more. Chase, good to be with you. Sure. Hey, listen, this field's going to be loaded with NFL talent. Let's start with Alabama. Writing for NFL.com and being based in Tuscaloosa, you see it up close and personal. Just how many guys, let's just talk about that are draft eligible, do you think are going to be playing in the NFL from Alabama next year?
You know, there's so many of them, you could barely count them with your fingers, but I think prospect-wise for Alabama, it starts with Jonathan Allen, the big defensive end, who's, I think, the best prospect on the team. He's a senior. Reuben Foster not far behind, and then there's just a line of others. More seniors than you would normally expect from a program like Alabama, because a lot of those guys came back to school for their last year when, frankly, especially Jonathan Allen was a little bit of a surprise. But they've got a loaded group: Tim Williams, Ryan Anderson, O.J. Howard. It goes down the line, and some juniors, Cam Robinson and Marlon Humphrey as well.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Cam. Interesting case, because I think he's played real well all year. He won the Outland Award, but I've seen a lot of the internet draft folks say that hasn't had a great year. What's the feeling on him? Is he a first-rounder if he comes out?
You know, it's possible. I think one of the issues that scouts have seen is they feel like he's a little bit more advanced as a run blocker than he is as a pass protector. Right. And but you know what? At that position, it's all about physical traits for the scouts. They want to know what kind of arm length you have. They want to know about your footwork, your technique. Obviously, it takes a lot of size, but I think Cam Robinson, if he decides that this is it for him, is going to be a prize for somebody. And by the way, it's a good year to be a tackle in the draft because there's not going to be a lot of tackles.
Of course, Clemson's loaded too. Mike Williams might be the top receiver, Wayne Gallman, but it all starts with Deshaun Watson, the quarterback. I don't see many people projecting him, though, as the overall #1 choice by the Browns, who might look quarterback. Where does he fall in that first round?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you'd have some scouts tell you he's not a first-round pick at all.
Right.
And others, I'm sure, would. A lot of his skill set is so intriguing because of not only his arm but his athleticism. But there are some scouting concerns on him as well. One of them is accuracy. Another one is anticipation. And being able to kind of throw guys open. But if you watched the Alabama game last year for the national championship, it's hard to have any questions about him because he succeeded in flying colors in this game a year ago.
You're not going to find many programs that have more NFL prospects than Alabama. 2 years ago, though, Ohio State might have had, and they won the game. I know on Crimson Cover TV, you picked Clemson last week. Do you think they have more pros on their squad than Alabama?
I really don't. I think most of the draft prospects, certainly most of the top draft prospects in the game, especially for 2017, are on the Alabama side. Now, 2018, 2019, obviously a little bit different story. Freshmen, Clemson's got some super talented freshmen and sophomores, as does Alabama. But I think for the guys that are looking at this coming draft, most of them on the Alabama side.
All right, real quickly, sticking with your Clemson pick, or you want to change it here and save face?
I got Clemson by 3. I think it could go either way. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be lower scoring than last year. But I do think Deshaun Watson's going to find a way to get it done. And I think that Clemson defensive line is going to give Alabama a lot of problems.
Thanks, Chase. Appreciate it. You saw a 68-yard touchdown. We'll have more from Bo Scarborough in his breakout performance against Washington. That's coming up next on Crimson Tide Kickoff.
I was one of those kids that watched the Bear Bryant show every Sunday, and every time Alabama was on or on the radio, I was listening. Fight you in school if you talk bad about them, and so it was surreal for me to finally be in the room and to be introduced to the team, and guys that I went on to be teammates with and great friends with to this day.
Welcome back to Ctko Live here in Tampa. I'm Gary Harris. Well, Clemson's Dabo Swinney is looking to become just the 5th man ever to win a national championship as a player and as a head coach. Of course, he won his national title as a player at Alabama under Gene Stallings in 1992. And one person who knows Swinney very well from his days with the Crimson Tide as a player is former Crimson Tide assistant coach T.J. Wiest. Wiest was Swinney's GA during his freshman season when Dabo was a walk-on, and he saw his potential early on.
You could tell back then he had great spirit, great dedication to Alabama, and had really had a good career, ending with the national championship, and has done a great job in coaching. But you can tell just his character, how much he loves his players. He's a guy that you don't find much in coaching. His guys really love playing for him, and you can see he loves to develop them.
And Dabo loves to talk about all the Alabama connections at Clemson. In fact, the 3 winningest coaches in Tigers history all played for the Crimson Tide. There are also children, grandchildren, and assistant coaches with prominent roles at Clemson with Alabama ties, including freshman safety Nolan Turner, son of former Crimson Tide fullback, the late, great Kevin Turner.
I'm sure, my grandparents probably a little Alabama in them because of my dad, but, they're 100% Clemson fans.
There's a lot of tie-ins at the University of Alabama and Clemson, especially over the years. You look at our school's history all the way back from Coach Howard to Coach Ford to Coach Hootie Ingram. Those are just some Alabama guys, and just Charlie Pell, just some guys that's really been the foothold of our school as well.
It's exciting to be able to, because it's such a great matchup, and then it's exciting for my team just because we've been working so hard to get here, and also just my connections to Alabama. So, it's a pretty interesting matchup for me, and then also just for our team. So I'm excited for it.
Alabama is looking forward to another big win in Tampa tonight, and we're looking forward to more Crimson Tide kickoff, including a one-on-one with the First Lady of Alabama football. Lynn Brooks sits down with Terry Saban next on Ctko.
Welcome back to the special edition of Crimson Tide Kickoff for the National Championship. I've gathered a big group of Bama fans here for our Pepsi fan cam. I have folks from Alabama and Florida. So why do you think Alabama is going to beat Clemson tonight?
Well, because Alabama has good defense, the best defense in the country, and as I said, one player always steps up in the game. O.J. Howard, Ardarius Stewart, Calvin Ridley. Someone's going to step up and make some plays. We're going to win.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Roll. They sure are excited. One more time for me.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. They're excited. I'm excited. Lots of excitement here in Tampa. Gary, back to you.
Well, thank you, Chelsea. Joining me now here live in Tampa is WVOA 23 news anchor Lynn Brooks. And, I'm just going to go ahead and say this. You're personal friends with Terry Saban. You guys have been doing the homecoming parade for years. You talk to her often. And because of that, when you ran into her recently, you said, hey, I'd like to sit down with you in Tampa for the national championship.
Yes, and you know what? Just before I came to sit down with you, Gary, I ran into her just inside the stadium. And one thing, this time we were not dressed alike. We tend to have this thing where we dress like twins sometimes, but she's great. She spoke exclusively to us. She's been Nick Saban's #1 consultant for more than 40 years now. And here's our exclusive one-on-one interview where she talks about her role in the process. I am here with the First Lady of Alabama football, Miss Terry Saban. Always so good to see you, Miss Terry.
Gosh, we need to get together more often other than just homecoming parades, right?
I know, and have you noticed we always tend to dress alike? We did not plan this.
Actually, you did call me, remember? Are you wearing your, yes, I'm wearing it.
Well, this is really incredible. Your 10th season with the Crimson Tide family, and here we are again competing for a national championship. Amazing.
Well, it's a dream come true, really. When you look back at 46 years of coaching and being married and taking different jobs and moving, 5 years was our limit, the longest we've ever been anywhere. And then when we were here 6 years, we were saying, wow, it's the longest we've ever been anywhere. And now to be here, not only to be here 10 years, but to feel like it's home and our children graduated from school here, and we have businesses here, and we have grandchildren here. It's truly home. But on top of that, to have all the success that this program has had is really a dream come true.
Wow, and to hear you say that, I remember seeing you last year in Arizona. I saw the look on your face when that national title was won. It was really incredible, and I can tell you're genuinely just happy. And did you ever imagine when you all arrived in Tuscaloosa basically a decade ago that this would be the dynasty that it is?
Well, I think that comes from living Nick's philosophy, and it is truly our philosophy, which is you live a day at a time. You never look back. You never dream too far ahead. You do what you have to do to be successful, and that's what he preaches to the team. And when he talks about players buying into the process, that's what it's all about, is do you have the discipline? Do you have the responsibility? Do you have what it takes to do every day the hard work to be a champion? Not just on the field, but to be a champion in the classroom, to be a champion, to be a man in the community. And when you do all those things, good things happen. But you don't ever sit back and say, I want to win a national championship. Yes. This comes because you've done all the hard work. This championship started in August. When it's 100 degrees, and I'm wondering how they're doing it out on that field in 2-a-days. But that's why we're here.
Wow. I feel motivated just listening to you, and I know you're the coaches. We've spoken many times about how you're the coach's #1 confidant, #1 consultant, and what are you doing to maintain the focus? There's a lot going on.
I actually think it's the reverse, Lynn. I think he maintains the focus, and when I see that focus heating up too much that he's starting to get frazzled, that's when I try to bring it down a little bit. That's when I try to say to him, the glass is half full, not half empty, because for Nick, he sees the problems. We have to fix this problem. We have this injury. We have this problem. How are we going to play this against that? So that's all that he's seeing. So he has no trouble being focused. To me, it's when it's over-focused that I try to find balance to help him, deflate just a little bit, enough to work.
What is your experience like when you come to one of these big games? Is it routine as usual? Do you just continue to follow the process? Or when it's a big game, do you do anything special? Is there anything special and unique that you do?
I think the coaches' wives will all tell you that this is for the fans. This is a reward for the fans and for the second and third generation families. It's really not for the coaches, and it's not for the coaches' wives, even though, you try to do the things to thank the Bowl for all the wonderful things that they do for you. You still maintain, there's that word, focus, to be there for your husbands, to be there for the program, to always be on alert. What do we need to do to get this done?
Wow, and I noticed you always mention the fans. You always acknowledge the fans. Even as we're sitting here talking, we have fans that are gathering nearby. What is your message for the fans that are going to be watching this big game?
I was really overwhelmed when I walked in to see this many people. But, Lynn, when you look at what the tickets cost, and the plane tickets and the hotel rooms and we don't take that lightly. I mean, it's hard for my family in West Virginia to get here, and we help every one of them to try to get here. But we're so grateful for all the sacrifices that they make to support our team. We don't take it lightly. And the players.
Untitled Chapter, Alabama, right here.
Exactly. So we do appreciate it, and the players really appreciate it, and it means a lot. They're a big help when we're on the field and it's third down. It means a lot to hear them.
And I know you are the #1 cheerleader. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to get a big Roll Tide. How about it?
1, 2, 3.
Roll Tide! Roll! And that pretty much sums it up, Gary, with a big old Roll Tide. Yeah. And I think the Tide's going to roll tonight.
That's great work, Lynn. Love that with Terry Saban. We'll be back to wrap up Crimson Tide Kickoff live from Tampa right after this break.
Good luck to our football team. Hopefully we play great in all 3 phases. Looking forward to an outstanding defensive performance and a much improved offensive performance. So good luck, Roll Tide, to our football team.
And we get a roll tide from Avery Johnson. Bama men's basketball 2-0 so far in the SEC. Also, congratulations to the Alabama women. They won on Sunday at Missouri 59-58, their first SEC road win in nearly 3 years. But right now, all eyes are on football and tonight's weather forecast. For that, we go back to the WVOA 23 studios in Tuscaloosa to Chief Meteorologist Richard Scott with our Townsend weather forecast. Richard?
Hey, Gary, here's a live look from Bryant Denny Stadium. There's the Walk of Champions. Maybe we'll add another one tonight. Let's hope so. But conditions out there in Tuscaloosa looking pretty good. If you're going to be outdoors, maybe heading to an event to watch the ball game, temperatures will be in the upper 30s by the time we end things later on tonight after midnight. Live look over in Tampa. Here's that forecast. Temperatures will be in the 50s. Now let's go back over to Gary live in Tampa.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for watching tonight. We've got to wrap it up for our entire crew here in Tampa and back in Tuscaloosa. This has been Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Have a good evening and enjoy the game, everybody. Roll Tide. Good night.